The moment that changed everything didn't come from a headline or a leaked photo. It came from a voice that had stayed firmly in the background for years, suddenly stepping forward when no one expected it. As speculation around Sam Heughan reached a fever pitch, his mother broke her silence, instantly reframing a story that had been spiraling out of control. For a long time, Sam's private life had been protected by a careful balance of charm and refusal. He answered questions without answering them, smiled without revealing anything, and kept his personal boundaries intact even under relentless attention. That consistency trained the public to accept distance as normal, which is exactly why the sudden involvement of his mother felt so unsettling. The context surrounding her decision mattered. Rumors had grown louder, sharper, and increasingly invasive, with assumptions presented as facts and speculation treated as confirmation. What once seemed like harmless gossip had begun to blur into pressure, not just on Sam, but on those closest to him. When Christine Heughan spoke out, the tone was neither emotional nor confrontational. Her words were measured, calm, and unmistakably intentional. She didn't offer details, but she didn't need to. The mere act of speaking signaled that something had crossed a line. Observers were quick to note what made her statement so powerful. There was no attempt to control the narrative, no effort to redirect blame, and no appeal for sympathy. Instead, she emphasized respect, reminding the public that speculation carries consequences far beyond entertainment. The reaction was immediate. Media outlets shifted focus, no longer dissecting Sam's silence but analyzing why a mother felt compelled to intervene. Fans who had eagerly followed every rumor began questioning their own role in amplifying stories that had never been confirmed. For Sam, the moment marked a turning point. Family involvement transforms gossip into something heavier, something more personal. Those close to him described a visible tightening of boundaries, not out of fear, but out of protectiveness, as if the situation now demanded a firmer stance. While attention centered on Christine's words, another element quietly entered the conversation. Dakota Johnson, long linked to speculation surrounding Sam, made a move that stunned observers. Not a statement, not a denial, but a deliberate action that suggested independence rather than reaction. The timing was impossible to ignore. Her decision came shortly after Christine's comments, creating an unspoken connection between the two moments. To many, it felt like a response without words, a refusal to be pulled into a narrative she did not create. Insiders described Dakota's move as intentional and quietly defiant. Rather than addressing rumors directly, she appeared to shift focus, reinforcing the idea that her life would not be shaped by external pressure. In doing so, she added another layer of complexity to an already tense situation. Public opinion fractured further. Some saw Dakota's action as a sign of strength, others as a provocation that might deepen the drama. What was clear, however, was that the story was no longer just about Sam. It had become a collision of voices, generations, and choices. As the dust settled, one truth emerged unmistakably. The silence that once defined this narrative had been broken, not by scandal, but by boundaries being asserted. And with a mother's voice on one side and a bold personal move on the other, the story had entered a phase no rumor could fully control. The consequences of that moment unfolded slowly, but with unmistakable weight. Once Christine Heughan had spoken, the story could no longer be framed as simple celebrity gossip. It had crossed into something more personal, more sensitive, forcing the public to reconsider where curiosity ended and intrusion began. For Sam Heughan, the shift was immediate. His silence, once interpreted as mystery or avoidance, took on a new meaning. It became protective rather than evasive, signaling that he was no longer just guarding his own privacy, but shielding his family from further speculation. Those close to Sam described a man steady but resolute, aware that every public gesture would now be scrutinized through a different lens. He did not rush to correct narratives or offer reassurance. Instead, he allowed the situation to settle, trusting that restraint would speak louder than reaction. At the same time, attention increasingly turned toward Dakota Johnson, whose unexpected move continued to puzzle observers. Rather than retreating or engaging, she appeared to advance on her own terms, making choices that emphasized autonomy over explanation. It was a reminder that silence can be active, not passive. The contrast between the two responses fascinated the public. On one side, a mother stepping in to draw a boundary. On the other, a woman asserting independence without acknowledging the storm around her. Together, they created a tension that felt deliberate rather than chaotic. Media coverage began to soften, not because interest faded, but because the tone had changed. What once thrived on speculation now required caution. Commentators spoke less about rumors and more about ethics, questioning how easily narratives spiral when left unchecked. Fans, too, appeared divided. Some applauded the family's intervention, seeing it as a necessary reminder of humanity behind the headlines. Others remained restless, convinced that unanswered questions meant hidden truths. Yet even among the most curious, there was a growing discomfort with how far the conversation had gone. Behind the scenes, insiders suggested that Dakota's move was not a reaction to the mother's statement, but a continuation of her own trajectory. Still, the timing ensured the two moments would be forever linked, whether intended or not. In that overlap, meaning was created by observers rather than participants. As weeks passed, the intensity slowly eased, not because clarity was achieved, but because the narrative refused to escalate further. Without new statements or dramatic turns, speculation lost momentum, replaced by reflection on how easily boundaries are tested in the public eye. What remained was not a resolved story, but a reframed one. The focus shifted from romantic conjecture to the dynamics of protection, autonomy, and control. It became less about who was connected to whom, and more about who had the right to speak, and when. In the end, the most striking element of the entire episode was its restraint. No confirmations arrived, no denials followed, just a series of choices that quietly asserted limits. And in an industry built on exposure, those limits proved far more powerful than any revelation could have been. In hindsight, the episode revealed how quickly a personal situation can transform into a public spectacle once family voices are involved. The moment Sam Heughan spoke, the balance shifted, reminding audiences that real people exist behind carefully managed images. For Sam Heughan, that shift may mark a lasting change in how he navigates visibility. The experience reinforced the cost of silence and the weight it places on those closest to him, making future boundaries not just personal choices, but necessary protections. Meanwhile, Dakota Johnson's quiet resolve continued to stand out. Her refusal to explain or soften her actions suggested confidence in letting time, rather than statements, dissolve speculation and reclaim control over her narrative. Ultimately, what lingered was not scandal, but a lesson. When privacy is defended from multiple sides, curiosity eventually gives way to respect, leaving behind a clearer understanding that not every story is meant to be fully told. As attention gradually moved elsewhere, the lingering effect was a quiet recalibration of expectations. Sam Heughan emerged with a clearer line between what belonged to the public and what did not, a distinction shaped not by controversy but by experience. The episode left a subtle mark, redefining how much access would ever be granted again. For Dakota Johnson, the aftermath reinforced a different kind of strength. By letting actions stand without commentary, she demonstrated that control does not always come from explanation. Sometimes, it comes from choosing silence and allowing time to do what headlines cannot.